what's up? How are you? Thank you so much for listening to Soul Sugar Conversations, the minds behind timeless R&B and soul music. A podcast for old souls, those young at heart, but especially the music heads. Hosted by yours truly, Brooks, with an S like Soul Sugar, a 20-something super fan of 70s and 80s jazz, soul, funk, and everything in between, but especially that period in that era. The strings, the horns, the arrangements, the medleys, the chord progressions, just everything. I believe that good music hasn't gone anywhere. So that's why I started Soul Sugar Joint. I did not know that other people felt so strongly about the connections that I make between classic and contemporary soul music. And it's great to know that there's other people who dig deep, who care about the liner notes, who have to know who produced it, who can identify samples by ear. Y'all are my people. Now this community has grown way past TikTok and is on Instagram and on YouTube and on your favorite podcast listening platforms. Without further ado, I hope you enjoyed the Soul Sugar conversation. Today's guest needs no introduction. He is a Grammy Award winning mixing engineer and producer. He has worked on your favorite albums. I'm absolutely certain of it. He's worked with Timberlake, Donny Hathaway, Roberta Flack, Brandy, Aaliyah. I was really hyped to know that he worked with the internet as well. And we're going to get all into it. This is Jimmy Douglas, everybody.
Hey, all.
So how are you doing today?
Very good, very good.
Awesome. So where are you presently?
I'm in Miami,
Okay.
where my studio is. That's where I've kind of been stationed for like the last maybe, I'd say 12, 15 years.
Yeah, what have been some of your favorite albums that you've worked on since being in Miami?
Well, I guess I kind of did. I guess I've done some Justin Timberlake records, and yeah, it's interesting. It's harder to focus on the more recent ones than the ones that were way in the way, way past. And
Well, let's start there.
well, I mean, no, it could be because the way, way past, I was my mom. I was a young kid running around, so I remembered everything. It was so precious. And now it's kind of like, music is also not quite as special anymore. I don't mean it like that. It's special for those that receive it that way, but for me, the novelty of like, oh my God, that's amazing. I don't get a lot of those. Um, and a big part of that is because the technology has a lot of us all sounding the same. Not putting anybody, I always have to say this, not putting anybody down. We are all a product of our generations and what's around us. And right now, anybody can go get a computer and make some music that's synthetic music. And it sounds like the next guy because we've all got the same samples loaded in our machines, as opposed to bringing in different players, they're different by design.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's there'll be 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 writers just for the top line when actually it's a very simple message. you know I know you, you know me, we want to get together, let's be free. Okay, that was simple. Wasn't great lyrics, but it was a set of lyrics and it came all from me, as opposed to having 4 people come in the middle and change every one of those words to make them politically correct and sellable. And that's kind of what I feel music is. I mean, it's good. The stuff is really good, but sometimes I'm just like, it's devoid of the human element, which is what we do on the daily. Well, I don't know what we do on the daily anymore, but that's what we used to do on the daily.
Yeah, speak to that, the humanness that you used to find in music and who you felt really embodied that.
Oh, I mean, I think most of the artists back in the day embodied that. Like you didn't get there unless you had that. A lot of people are getting there that don't have that because they can fake it basically. And our definition of fake it until you make it was still you had to learn a craft to get there. There was a discipline that was in there that's kind of sometimes missing, and sometimes it just looks a little different. I'm not saying people aren't disciplined now, but you can be making music and communicating. You could do it within a week now or a month. You don't have to sit there and learn to play an instrument and shed for a year or two and get the discipline of having to, okay, I'm committed. I'm committed. And as you commit, you learn. And as you learn, you grow. And as you grow, even when it's really interesting. Even when we would still try to make music based off music we heard, let's say on the radio or by other people. But understand this: we didn't sit with the record and listen to it verbatim and copy what they did. We would just take the idea of what they did and we would do it our way. And that's why the different records, while they were kind of close, they weren't really close, because your idea of what you thought the record sounded like is not what the record sounded like. And I got to say, now what you do is you take the record, you put it on your little thing, you keep repeating all the parts till you find the same exact parts they had, and you put it into your mix, you put it into your thing, and so all you've got is a copy of what they did. And I'm not saying it's not creative, and I keep saying this over and over, not putting anybody down. We're all product of what's around and what's available. And I have a feeling if I was 18, I'd be doing that. I'd be doing it too, because you just want to get in.
Very true.
Right? I mean, am I wrong?
No, not at all. And everything that you're saying, I absolutely hear where you're coming from, because I can only imagine what being in those sessions were like. Because I know a bit of your story. You worked at Atlantic Records, but it's funny how you got into it, because it was just a way to pay for school, right? And that's how you got to see the sessions that were going on, that were happening.
Exactly. Theoretically, that's what it was to be, to pay for school. I didn't. After I saw that stuff, what's school for what? I did it anyway. I mean, I went to Fordham University, and
Okay.
One of the things that was interesting was, like, they wouldn't let me get on a lot of sessions because they were going, well, you're not full time and you're not really working here, so we're not going to let you work on a lot of stuff. And I'm like, yo, I can ditch the college.
Right. Say the word. Say
You know what I'm saying?
Especially because it was a wild lineup. I mean, you were working with, like, I keep bringing up Aretha Franklin just because she is the queen of soul music and is no longer with us. But it's just incredible that in that time, to see them working through something, or to hear them play out different melodies and just understand what that was, to just be in the atmosphere. Do you feel like that shaped your approach for mixing even to today, the way that you heard it back then?
It absolutely did. And I will say, while I'm going to say this statement, I was going to say it was kind of seamless. It wasn't always totally seamless. It wasn't always that easy, but I will say that the solutions came a lot more reasonable. Like when you mention people like Aretha or Donny Hathaway, it's like whatever little problem they were going to have, they could figure out ways around it really quickly, because their talent basket was so thick, many different options to play with. And I find now, many of the modern artists, I'm not all of them, but some, they depend on what I do to make it work for them. In other words, they come to the studio expecting that I can do all the tricks that I used to do, the tricks back in the day after Aretha, Donnie, Roberta, you name it, after they've done a stellar performance, which doesn't really need the tricks. When I do my tricks, it only enhanced it and took it all to another level. But those were performances I was working with. When they would get on the mic, they would perform. And, we're not performing anymore. We're doing bits and pieces to fill in the data. That's kind of what it is. And then we take the data and we manipulate it later, and, and do all kinds of stuff to it to make it feel, I call it more like, I don't know when you grew up, but did you used to watch, those cartoons on Saturday morning at all? No, see,
No.
went to another era. But so what would happen was, before that, they would have all the cartoons on Saturday morning, like when I was a kid and stuff. And then, like, for tricks are for kids and all that kind of crap. Did on those commercials has always stuck with me, because what they did was they would always, and even for my kids, when I had my kids, I'd let them watch that stuff. And basically all of the commercials went like this, to be like, hi, and the thing would pop out and wow, and to keep the kids is the whole zazzle. And so basically, that's, to me, what records are trying to be. They're trying to capture people's zazzle. Ooh, did you zazz me there? Did you zazz me there? Which doesn't really have anything to do with a performance by an artist, because that alone will capture you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. the people making music and even doing previews on TikTok that are only 7 seconds long, it can be overstimulating, or they're just trying to get your attention. So then it can go viral and they can get, either it's a record deal or it just the sales and the streams that they want. And I'm really glad that you're talking about this, because that was going to be the question that I asked you, and how long your career has been. How do you stay open-minded, or what is your, thought process or feelings around seeing this evolution in music? Because it almost reminds me of, I read a book about Soul Train Don Cornelius, and how he, started at the prime of the 70s and all these different acts, and then he had to get with the times, and it just transformed into a completely different show, and he wasn't feeling it anymore, because it's like, this is not where it started. So I just would love to hear you even elaborate more on it, like share your hearts.
Well, so there is a key part in my career that I don't really talk about. It's really kind of hard to talk about. This is all in the book, by the way, that will be coming.
Yes.
Like, so through the through being the little kid there, and honestly, little kid, they couldn't even pay me up at Atlantic because I was so young. They couldn't put me in the payroll. Illegal back then to pay somebody under 16. So I was getting paid, but not on the books. And so that's what I started there. But through that period and all the great music that I made, which went into the 70s, and the rock and roll and the Foreigners and the Rolling Stones and all that stuff, which was amazing. That's all I can say. And then as I rolled into the 80s, I was doing a lot of funk and slave and so forth, but music was changing. As you know, towards the end of the 80s, the street mode. Let me interrupt the story for 1 second, because I was on one of these clubhouse things one night with Grandmaster Flash.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was just like, oh my God. Because I never really knew him back then. Because the thing was, I was in the studio with all these superstars, and they were doing very well. So why would I look anywhere else? But he says to me, yeah, man, we was up there and we was doing these records that do this and do that. And I'm thinking, and he kind of was talking to me kind of like, you don't know that. That's how he was talking to me. And I was thinking, I wouldn't know it, because I'm making top #1 records of the regular things that we all knew and grew. I didn't know y'all was in the streets forming this new thing. I didn't have to hunt. I'm in the middle of it. So when he said that, I was like, wow, that's an interesting perspective. You guys did it because you weren't a part of that, and you were creating your own new, which is very important. When you're creating your own new, there's nothing like it in the world. There really isn't. It's like almost like when I ran into Timberland, it's like we were creating our own new. There wasn't anybody around us. We weren't trying to copy. We were just doing what we were doing. And that's when it's the most fun. But to back up a little bit, towards the end of the 80s, I was going to London a lot. I was searching, trying to figure out what's going next, but I wasn't looking in the street. And I got to be honest, I don't know if I was really, really feeling rap like that. My little nephews and stuff, they would turn me on to it, and I'm going, yeah, but they're just singing over somebody's record. That bothered me at first. I know a lot of talented, great musicians. I'm like, why don't they just play their own music? But that's not what's up. That's not what's going to be up. And I had to learn to understand all that. But there's a thing before the digital recording revolution. There was two items that were really important. There was a synclavier, and there was a Fairlight. And both of these instruments would allow you to sample audio, so that you could go, and you would change the pitch, all the stuff that anybody can do right now for probably $50. These machines the synclavier costed $250,000. The Fairlight costed about this a good $200,000. Herbie Hancock had them. Stevie Wonder had them. All the big people with big money had them, but it was a different learning curve. It was no longer analog. It was a digital, and it was a different way of thinking. I spent about 2 years. I took 2 years off. Atlantic happened to own one of these machines, and nobody was using it. And I was like, you get out of here. So I delegated myself to just teach myself how to use this machine. So I started doing that way before everybody else was. So I wasn't really worried. I wasn't really dealing with the content. I was dealing with the concept. And that was amazing, except that in that period of time, Avid and all these other, well, they weren't called Avid, Pro Tools and so forth, they were able to make it for the common man. So where I had elitism and I felt, oh, I'm on the mountain, I won't be caught for a while. Suddenly little kids are coming in the door with their little Pro Tools and they're doing the same thing I'm doing. Maybe it's not as glorious, but the concept. Now we start to get back to the content. That's kind of a piece of my life that was that had me like lost for a minute. You know, as the new rap thing was happening, I wasn't really called on to be a part of it. Like, you know, like this technology I was talking about. There's one thing I did one time with a Heavy D. And I remember I was using this crazy machine because he wanted, you know, he could have it. But he said to me, he said, can you do a scratch? Can you make it scratch or whatever? And I'm thinking, what is he talking about? Understand, I'm not in the clubs in the street. I'm like, what is he talking about? And he said, can you do this and that? And I'm thinking, in my head, what are you talking about? And all he was talking about was a simple thing from a turntable. And I went to learn that later. And, you know, but it was like, I had this high tech technology, but my content was off. I was missing the meat of what people,
like getting down to the street level where people are actually listening to these records, what's happening there.
right. They didn't care about how great, because by the way, these machines sounded amazing. They sampled at 100K. They played back at 100, which is incredible sample rate for back then. So anyway, yeah, it wasn't about that. It's about the content, isn't it?
Yeah. And having it resonate. And when people feel it, I think that's what is making this music timeless. And all of the records that I saw in your discography, I was blown away because I even remember you mentioning in an interview about how we talk about the past, and like I'm one of those people, I talk about the past, talk, but it really is a lifestyle when these albums come out. Like I know for me, the most recent one that was a lifestyle change was me hearing Ego Death for the first time or hearing Hive Mind for the first time. And yeah, like that was high school for me. And when I heard it, I was like, man, what is this? Because all these elements of neo soul and jazz and their own take on just how much freedom it felt like they were having as a band, because you don't see that so often in music anymore. There's not a lot of bands and musicians and the frontman not being the star, but they're all stars within the group. And I would love to hear about some of your favorite more recent collaborations with modern artists, if there are any that come to mind.
So the reason I mentioned what I mentioned is because everybody's kind of not really collaborating. That I'm saying you can take your machine home, do everything you need to do, put it together, and then you send it to me and I mix it. There's no,
Oh, like actual coming to you and like shaking your hand, seeing you in person.
well, and even, and you know, and suggestions, thoughts, you know, what are you doing? Oh, you know, maybe we try this, maybe we try that. That doesn't make me the producer, but it's like we can maybe improve in the record, but they're very, very clear about what they want. And they really don't need the interaction. Well, I mean, well, whether they need it or not, I should change the word. They really don't really welcome it because they don't need you, because the machine can do everything they want it to do. You know, if I'm doing one little piece on strings, actually, I'm going to do, but if you want strings, I don't have to talk to an arranger and have extra budget and do all this stuff. I just go to my little toolbox and I go,
True.
I've got strings. So what do I need all those other people and all that other input? I don't, you know, and that's kind of the world that we are in now. And I've gotten very used to it. And that's what I do when people send stuff. And that whole era of collaboration, like you're saying, when I mixed the internet, they actually came down to Florida though, and we spent a bunch of days doing it together.
I love to hear that. I was like, no, not them. Okay, cool.
Because you know why? They, once again, Sid is sick with it as a producer in terms of making the beats and stuff. She's really on it.
Yes.
There wasn't a lot to do there except for kind of not reshape, just kind of, you know, trim the edges on what she already had. You know what I mean? It wasn't a major overhaul at all. Her stuff she's pretty awesome, you know?
Yes.
And then you got Steve there in the background, playing the dopeness, right?
Yes.
You got all, everybody was dope in the band. They were all having their contributions, to the music. And I think that makes a big difference. I'll tell you something interesting about studios. So if I really go back and not really back that far in the day, even in the 80s, whether it's rock and roll bands, funk bands, whatever it is, they'd have a roadie, for instance, somebody that goes all this around with them, brings their equipment around and takes care of them, right? They pay for that. But the point of the story is this: when we be recording, let's just say if it was a funk, let's say it was Slave, for instance. Okay. So here we are. We kind of do the track. There's 3 or 4 of us, and I read it down. We're doing the track. But meanwhile, there's another guitar player sitting there waiting to do something. Maybe one of the vocalists sitting waiting to do something. In their case, Steve Arrington, the drummer, was the vocalist. So he was always involved from day one. But my point is, there's people around the studio that were all waiting to contribute and do their part. Right? So while we're in there, and then there's the roadie. So then while we're in there, what'll happen is while they're all waiting for us to get to the place where we need them, somebody would be like, oh, hey, I'm gonna go get some food. Anybody want anything? You're like, okay, boom. You're making yourself useful while we're all making ourselves useful at the moment. And I have to say, the biggest disparity or difference, AB, to the modern sessions is a bunch of people come to the sessions which have nothing to do with the music.
You see it all the time.
All the time. And they're just a crew of people. And not only that, while you're not doing nothing and hanging out, why don't you go to the store instead of having my assistant, you taking him from me to go order you food? Stop it, guys. Come on. Be a part of contributing. I know what the contribution is, though. And I really get this too. And I agree with it. The contribution is the hype machine, because in order for the modern artist to get into it, he needs to have his private audience that goes, that shit was fire. And then now he feels good.
Yes.
And I'm not putting it down. I'm going, we all need to do what we need to do to get there. And that's part of the new fabric, part of the new landscape of the studio experience.
It's just so interesting to hear from your perspective too. And I know that I talked to a producer in my last interview, and I've spoken with musicians, but I haven't spoken to the mixing engineer. And I would love to know some of the nuances, or what it's like to be you in the studio. And I would love to know, because there's so many important parts, and I'm sure that I wouldn't enjoy the experience of an album if it wasn't for you and other people who do your job. So just would love to speak to that.
For instance, me and Timberland, we, because of where I came from and where he was coming from, a new youthful outlook with all this stuff, I had another level of experience, and I had another level of importance. It was all very important, but I was excited. Of course I was. This shit was fire. This shit was crazy.
Yes.
Never heard nothing like it. Okay, fine. But that being said, at the end of the day, with all the records I've made, I don't mean it like this, but I'm going to say it was just another record.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't, but it was. And we treated it accordingly. And we just methodically went about doing whatever. When I look back at what we've done, what the stuff we've done, I'm going, where were you, Jimmy? You missed this. Because we just did so many records, and we were just, what I mean? We were very methodic about it. We were also we were also not partaking in the outside things. I did all that back in the 70s and the 80s. I was like, I had put that away, and he wasn't on that page. So we were able to be very efficient with the work, because we were very clear-minded and very straight ahead. It's like, why are we here? We're here to work. Let's work and let's go home. But in saying that, when we would be working, or when we'd be mixing, especially, I, being the senior in the room, I would clear the room out. And basically, and he didn't mind. He didn't go the other way and say, no, man, I want people. No, he was just like, whatever Jimmy said. And I was like, yeah, you guys got to go, because you're just disrupting and distracting us from doing what we need to do, which is just get this right. You know what I'm saying? And the other stuff is cool. You can come in later after we're done and you can dance around and and we can high five. We can do all that, that. But
Yeah.
right now, we need to actually be able to focus on the product and get it right. So that makes basically most of those mixes were just me and Timberland in the room together.
Wow. Could you speak a little bit more to your relationship with Timbaland and even how that you guys became this dynamic duo in the studio?
Timberland, I had that was an interesting sound that just came out. Um, I had, like I said, things were a little different towards the end of the 80s. I started doing a lot of jingles and stuff just to keep it to survive. I wasn't really invited to the rap game, um, and didn't really understand it, so wouldn't be invited. But then I was doing a lot of other things. I met this guy up in Rochester, and a studio owner who wanted some urban. He needed. He was trying to get the urban vibe to come up there. Rochester, so so you might not know, but New York City is New York City, New York, New York, and then in New York State, you go up about 6 hours, 6 or 7 hours, and there's Rochester. It's next to Buffalo. It's in between Buffalo and Syracuse. So I'm saying, so that's where Rochester was, and we were down here. And this guy wanted to get people from the city to come up to his studio, but he had no urban flavor. You know what I mean? His father used to sell tires, and they built a studio around that whole concept. And there's no funk and there's no anything R&B. There's nothing in Rochester. So he invited me up to do a couple of things for him, and then he ended up getting that call from Devontae for Jodeci to do that album, the show, the after party, the party, what that whole thing. And he when we were up there, they I think they had booked for like 6 months to make the album. It turned into 2 years. It turned into like a year, but turned to about a year and a half to make that album, and then we were up there for like 2 years. But inside of this crew, there was Timberland. He was part of the crew as a producer, just a young kid, man, with his ASR, who was he did the I don't know what to say. I've seen a lot of things in my life. I've seen a lot of musicians. I've seen a lot of music, but Tim would do stuff in a way that was just so different, and his attitude was different.
Mm.
You know what I mean? He he wasn't full of himself, and for me, that's major because I've worked with a lot of people, and one thing I can say is this: a lot of great people that I've worked with, they are humble because they're great. That is what they are excel at. There's a lot of people that are really, I don't know, I want a polite, nice name for saying like not cool because they're compensating for the talent they don't have. And they'll push
Mm.
people around and they just be like, dude, why are you acting this way? It's not necessary, you know? Um, Tim was he was just there doing this crazy stuff, and we ended up working together in the midst of that album. I decided I did half that album, and then Devontae was a very maniacal um, about his mixing. He would like stay there and do it for 2 or 3 weeks. He just wouldn't let things go, and I decided, you know what, I really don't want to do this because the music is great, the stuff sounds great, and of course it can always sound better, but at a certain point I always believe you get it or you don't. So the thing is, like down there, so there was about 3 studios, so there was another kid, another engineer who wanted to be next to Devontae so bad. He'd never really done anything in his life. Me and Devontae used to have these conversations all the time. I go, yeah, I've done this and I've done that and I've done it. He goes, and he just never, he was that example I was saying. He never just listened to me. And then he go, you about to have your first platinum album, man. And I'm thinking, I just told you I got 30 platinum albums. You just don't hear me because you're
No.
full of yourself.
Mm.
Um, but that's part of that stuff. But no, but I love the guy. But the point is, the other kid was excited to be with him. And I was like, hey, why don't you go with him? I think they accomplished maybe about 20 records in the course of the year, maybe 25. We did 300 records in 2 years. they weren't records, they were demos or whatever, and most of it never got saw the light of day. But just trust me when I tell you, it was the beginning of the same stuff that Timberland was doing. And it was just, we just got to know each other. We just got to be to where it was, we're just doing it. It
Yeah.
wasn't any what we are, any whatever. It's just like, you ready? Ready, boom, done, boom, next. Oh, that was dope. Boom, put that one back up. We were just in sync.
Yeah. And so
Yeah,
anything that he worked on,
Yeah.
that
I was
became what you
working on
worked
it.
on next. Okay. So
Exactly.
the Aaliyah, the Missy Elliott.
Well, no. That all came later when we left Jodeci.
Okay. Yep. That would
I'm
make
talking.
sense.
We did this many records before it was for real.
Wow.
So we were just basically in school together,
Yeah. Locked
figuring
in.
out, yeah, learning. You know that's that. So yeah, when we busted loose, then we were already like up here somewhere. Like,
Yeah.
our level of proficiency was just ridiculous.
You guys like you tweaked the process so much that it just became like a machine between the two of you, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
it's a lot of fun. It's great. Those are good days.
And is that kind of collaboration rare or that kind of partnership rare?
I don't know if you would call it rare, but when you find it, you hold on to it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are other people out there that kind of have that kind of synergy. A lot of really good producers have a really good engineer partner, mixer that can kind of reinterpret for them when they're there, not there. Like I could fill in for him easily. You know, in my case, producing all the stuff I had done, he could leave me with artists that were doing vocals, and he didn't have to be there because he already knew. I know that's what I do. That's what I've done. You know what I'm saying? So it was a whole nother. It was like having an extra co-producer basically
Mm-hmm.
in the house. You know, and he was okay with it, and I was okay with it. I think part of our synergy was the fact that I didn't feel I had anything to prove to anybody because I'd made a lot of great records with some of the greats. So it wasn't like I was like trying to prove anything. I was just like, oh, this is as long as this is good and it's fun, and you treat me like a human being, and we treat each other like we're really cool. This is great. Doesn't get no better.
Love that. Yes. Yes. Like, and like you were saying, sometimes it just really isn't necessary the way that people can come across. So it's really nice to know. And I see that in just even how open he is to younger artists and people who are up and coming. He'll be on live streams and listening to new submissions from people who are making beats. And I'm just like, that is just so cool. Like, I love to know that there's someone who understands that there's a new generation coming up and is like, okay, they're gonna need guidance, and they're gonna look at you like, whoa, Timbaland, because I mean he deserves it, every little bit of it. And it's just really interesting in your story how you said that you weren't invited into rap and you didn't get it, but then you end up having credits for Jay-Z and Timbaland and and Pharrell, who is another major producer who just put out hits like it was nothing. It felt like, just constant.
So
Yeah,
it was
I think also part of with Timberland, what for us, being like once again the older senior in the room and having seen, there's a bunch of artists I had seen growing up that had lost their fortunes. Because Sheaf was one of them actually. He used to do baby my love
Kashif.
come down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kashif, yep.
Yeah, and he did some Whitney and he did all these things, but I remember he had amassed a big fortune, but he was a nice guy. He wasn't nasty, but I noticed he just overindulged. I'll put it that way. And eventually he didn't have what he should have had with the amount that he made. And I would always talk to Tim because I think Devontae had like 17 cars and all this other stuff. And he's a young kid. I think Tim's like 19 at this point, and he's struck by it all. And I was just looking, I go, that ain't it, dude. Like, he ain't gonna be there forever. And that's a concept that you just mentioned that a young person can't understand. Youth, whether you're making music or just being young, youth says, I'll be here forever. This will never go away. And here's me having been a bit through whatever. And it was like it kind of when I was like, so check it out, dude. This will not last forever. And Tim always remembered that. We always talked about that concept because he would ask me things about it. I go, no, I'm just saying you're there when you're there, but we're not there forever. There's always going to be a new guy in town, a new gunslinger, as I call it. And he was like, oh, so like, like you mentioned, this thing he's doing with auditioning this stuff, it's great. And by the way, that personality he's doing, it's not made, that's classic prime Timberland.
That's him.
That's who he was when he was the young guy that made me just go, you are different. Like you don't hold back no punches.
He doesn't. He doesn't. I love how he'll just turn off a song if he's not feeling it in the first 3 seconds. He's like, this is not it. Click. And then I love the honesty because it's so true. He doesn't want to hold back. And then that's why his opinion is just so revered because, whoa, he's really messing with this. Like, but that's awesome. What would you say is your favorite part of mixing and why you stuck with it, even though you were exposed to so many other aspects of production?
Well, so the thing is, with the machines and stuff and making beats and stuff like that, there was a bit inside of me that wasn't quite excited because I told you I worked the clavier. I could do all these things, but I was missing the practice time of messing with the content on little machines, like an MPC. Somehow I was still the engineer. So let me. This is very interesting. So around this period of time in the 80s, I put a studio in my house, which was a big thing. I had a little board there in my house. I built a section. My kids had to go to their bedroom and whatever. I kind of put my family out, but I had that. I had a tape machine and I had my record collection. And this is a true story of what happened to me. I started inviting young kids to come. They had a thing called the Village Voice. There was no internet. So I would just advertise, hey, come be with a guy who's done amazing things. Come, let him make your records. And then all these rappers I get, they come and this is exactly what happened. They would, they sit there and be amazed at what I have done in my life. And then they grab a record or two from my record collection, which was sick. Of course it was sick. I grew up with it I collect all this shit since I'm a kid and it's all fine.
Crazy. I want to see it.
and they go, oh, put that on there. And then I play beats. They go, yeah, that thing right there. And they like a little drum piece, whatever. Go, yeah. They go, yeah. Record. I record it to the tape, and they go, oh man. And then I would copy it and then make it go a couple times. And they go, oh man, it just needs a little. You want a drum? I put a drum on it. Poof, poof. They go, yeah, that's hot. That thing, ting ting. That's it. Oh, hi-hat. Yeah. Put some of that. I put some of that on there, maybe whatever. And then they go, oh, you a dope producer. And I would look at them and go, I wasn't producing. I was just engineering. Like, you guys picked all the stuff. So that flipped over to now the new producer's the guy who picks the stuff and puts it in his machine. And that's that. So that was for me a learning period, period where I learned, oh, this is called new production. And it took me a while to get used to it because I was an elitist. Understand, I came from a world where, the drummer's coming, the bass player's coming, the guitar player's coming. You put mics up, you do all this stuff to make it work. You no longer have to do that. And it took me a while to just kind of get into the fact and let go of my elitism that I used to have and understand the new youth enjoys it this way. I don't know if I lost my train of thought there, but I hope that can.
No, it did. It did connect. And a new producer, I just think that that's an interesting viewpoint on it because having had such a extensive career where you are working with, you said the Hot 100s, and even back then that was different than what a Hot 100 means today, where it's like you're saying, you bring in these orchestras sometimes and you're dealing with composers and arrangers and the talent is out of this world. And like today we're selecting different sounds and putting them on top of each other. And there is a level of arranging and production there. I would say there's some artists who I love who are taking what the past has done, like Tyler, the Creator. He'll have like real strings in his work. Same with the producer I talked with in my last interview, Flower Child. He had strings that he was arranging in his work. And I just think it's so amazing to hear it. And I, even though I wasn't there, I can resonate with the fact that that timeless feeling, the feeling of it being human, and you can tell that they felt something really crazy when they were creating this, and they're pushing it and sharing out into the world. And that's, I think, the essence of what soul music is. Like, you feel it in your heart of hearts. And I don't think that that's missing, but you do have to look for it more than I think you ever had to, because it was just getting served up on radio, I feel like, back in the day. Whereas now it's like you have curators, and now I'm curating things, and I didn't even mean to be in this space in my life. I'm like, this is just what I like to hear, and people are looking for it. So I really hear you on that.
Well, you know, what you said about the radio, to be fair, it's no different than it ever was. It was crowded. There was so much talent, and it was so crowded. And to get on there is still the same stuff you need. The promotion here, everything had to still be in place. The problem is now there's just more available to more people, like more means, right? Especially the internet and all the different ways of getting your own publicity. Yeah. And there's more people doing it. And there's less radio stations that make any difference, actually.
You
know,
right.
What do you hope would be brought back, or like an element of past, even working in a studio, that you would love to have see again, I guess, or have come back?
That's a really interesting question. That was put very interesting, because I don't really want to see anything again. I want to see what's coming next. I love that. In all honesty, that's what excites me to see. So yeah, so I've been talking about how people kind of do it a certain way now. So I know what to expect. I know what the engineer does. Oh, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. Wait, time out. Why are we doing it again? Oh, so in your head, you're going to do it until you figure it out. When, if we talk about it, maybe I can help you get there quicker. Like a director of a film. It's like, why am I doing this act part again? Give it more, do this or do that. Thank you. Okay, that's advice. So now we're all watching it with the same eyes as to why it works or doesn't work. When you're standing there doing it over and over and over again yourself, after a while, it's like, I'm disinterested. I heard a bunch of them that sounded good on the way in, but we're not talking about it. We're not sharing it. So it's a one-man process. It's not a collaboration. I'd like to see more of the future people doing stuff. If you're going to be in the studio, which you don't have to, if you're going to be there, sharing the energy together. Because listen, to me, recording, the whole thing about music, it's all energy. And I have this really crazy statement that I don't know if it really holds any water. Sometimes I feel it, and sometimes I think you're just talking shit, Jimmy. But you know, digital has no energy. If you think about it, it's ones and zeros. It's not even real. It's digits, and they put it together. Whereas when you go to a piece, I'm not suggesting we all go back to tape, but when you go to a piece of tape, it's literally magnetic impulses going on the tape. That's energy. And so what we try to say, oh, it feels different. I'm like, it does feel different, because something happened in that transformation. There was a natural transformation that's still inside of frequencies and magnetic pulses that, as the earth has, as opposed to a formula, which is, this is a 1 and a 0, 1 and a 0, and then that puts it together, and there's no, and the other thing about analog is, like, you cannot duplicate any of that. Even when you duplicate it, copy it, it's not exact. With digital, everything is exact. There's my first problem. Like, I don't want to hear what I heard. I don't know if you, well, yeah, you say you like those older records. Part of what's great about them, to me, is when you, like, especially when you have the backgrounds and stuff, and then towards the end, the ad libs get weird, and then they even change the background part, because they, yeah, and part of that is because they were all standing at the mic together doing this part, and suddenly they all felt it's getting stale, and somebody just changes a part and they all go with it, and then next thing you know, there's the magic. Yeah. So once again, I'm not connecting these dots very well, but I know what I'm talking about.
No, it's clear you know what you're talking about, and it's coming across, because I just love to hear, I mean, your perspective. I think anybody who has done the work that you've done, and what I like to hear is how you think about it. Like how you said that you and Timbaland have created something that was so efficient, like this meticulous machine, and even your perspective on how music has shifted in the process of making it. I think it's all really valuable to get that perspective. And I have a question that's actually from my little cousin. He's a producer and he's going to school for production. And I asked him, I was like, I'm talking to Jimmy Douglas because he and Timbaland actually have some sort of relationship where he was on his little live streaming show, and it actually like became this incredible thing. And not little, very big deal. Very proud of him. I'm the proud big cousin. And so he was asking that when you are approaching different genres, do you have a specific way that you approach a certain genre, or is it a unique mix every time?
So that's a really good question, by the way. And I think I can actually answer it the way I answer it. Part of my way of mixing, and I'll say unlike the modern mixer, like everybody has these templates before they start. Like before they even start, they've already put you in a particular box, and they basically put you inside of their box and mix the record. You are basically conforming to them. Because of where I came from, I was mixing jazz, I was mixing rock, I was mixing R&B, I was mixing, you name it. And there was a studio, and now all I had was like the music in front of me to tell me where to go. So I've developed that habit along the way of like the music dictates to me what I do, and I can't tell you before I do it what I'm going to do. I mean, I could tell you, but I'm just saying in general, my inclination is to lean, propensity is to lean towards what you got. What's your music doing for me? How's this making me think? How's this making me feel? And that's how I do it. And I know, when I say I know with the fast modern pace, hotshot engineers, they're just about making that money and getting that thing in the door and getting it out. But I'm like, I'm not really in a hurry. Plus, I'm making a. I'm kidding.
What is your main motive then behind it? If it's not about the hurry, or it's not about a certain amount of streams, what is your own personal motivation towards approaching every song or every record?
Well, my personal motivation is like I really don't understand what I'm supposed to do until I hear what's there, and that's the guy in me that's always been able to be open. Because when you're not, then you're gonna miss out on many things. The other part is like, sometimes I'm like, well, um, things are moving really quickly and really fast, and everybody kind of wants you to sound like everybody else, and I'm like, I can do that. It just doesn't make me feel anything. I mean, it makes me feel when I nail a record that sounds like whatever record, and I mean, of course, it makes me feel good, but in general, aiming for that doesn't make me feel. What makes me feel good is to be able to enjoy music with somebody and just do it. And it's a thoughtless process. And so when you're asking me, I'm like, I don't know the answer like that. I just know that I grab it and I start doing it, and
It sounds like you enjoy the process. Yeah, like you love the process, that it's a lot of curiosity and just taking it as this unique new thing that you're like, okay, well, let's help this thing to form, or
I guess just be open
or
to
not.
what it becomes. Yeah.
or not. Is there any I guess recommendations for a song that you feel like is masterfully mixed or engineered by someone who isn't yourself, or like any mixing engineers that you would say are the mixing engineer's engineer?
Well, I think that I think the mixing engineer's engineer mixer would be arguably Serban. He's gotten it down to a science that's unbelievable. And there's a whole bunch of others in LA. You have I could go down the list, but then if I go down the list, I'm going to leave a lot of people out, so I'm not going to go down the list. Is that fair?
That's very fair.
Because there's a lot of really good dudes out there, and then there's a lot of people doing this thing.
Could you speak a little bit about Serapin? Is that the person's name? Serapin. Could you speak a bit about their work?
I'm gonna say Servant probably every time you look at the top 10, the top pop top 10, he's probably got 3 records in there probably every week.
Wow.
You know, he does those records. They send them to him, and you know, he does a great job. Not saying he's doing anything different than anybody else can do, but he's the guy. He's got the whole everything you've been asking me. He figured it all out. He figured out how to make this whole thing a process and a science, and he figured out, why are you doing this? I got lazy. I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing it. You know, look, it beats the heck out of like walking the streets and hitchhiking, I guess. That's not a good answer though.
That's funny.
Oh, that's something nobody does anymore. Hitchhiking, huh? See?
Right. Look.
When I was a wee little guy, you could do that. You could actually hitchhike. That's so crazy. That was, when you think about it, that was crazy. But you know, people,
they kind of digitized it, because Ubers and Lyfts, it's kind of like hitchhiking.
you got to pay for those though.
Yeah, true. It's not. Yeah, not the essence of a free ride. Putting your thumb up.
There's a whole thing to it. You know, you get in there. Where are you going? Oh, I'm going to the. Oh, that's a cool place, man. Let's go. Yeah. I wasn't going there before. Now I'm going just because I get a free ride.
Man, that is a different time.
That is a different time.
Well, I honestly would love to give you an open-ended question of like, what would you love people to know about your career, or just even what you do on a daily basis? Just, I guess there's so many interviews or when people have their prepared questions, but sometimes you don't feel like you get something off of your chest and what you want other people to know about you. So,
well, like I said earlier, the book is coming.
Oh, great.
That's really major. Oh, and while we're here, I believe they're having I don't believe ABC is having a special next week on the 14th or the 12th. Well, would it be the 14th, Wednesday, from I think it goes on. You'll see it in your net. It's about Aaliyah, actually. Okay. And I think I appear in there, and I'm just mentioning it because I think it should be pretty good. I didn't really get to see it, and I hope I don't end up with donkey ears. No. Stuff, but I'm just thinking I'm interested in seeing you know, because there was a little movie thing they did for her, which people kind of were like, yeah, whatever. And this is just different interviews and stuff.
Amazing. I didn't even hear about that, so I definitely would be checking that out.
It should be interesting.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, for everything that you were willing to share with me. That's our time. But really, it's an honor to speak with you, and I hope it's not the last.
Oh, cool. It's really cool talking to you. Really good speaking to you and meeting you.
Thank you. You too. Hey, it's Brooks again. Thank you so much for listening to Soul Sugar Conversations, the minds behind timeless R&B and soul music. I hope that you learned something new, learned something that's worth sharing, or just felt like your curiosity was satisfied as a fan and a lover of soul music, because that's why I have these conversations, because it does something for me. I don't know. If you'd like to support for free, you can do so by following Soul Sugar Joint on TikTok and on Instagram. I have the same profile picture that I have in my cover art for this podcast. And if you got a little spare change, you can purchase my merch on my website, soulsugarjoint.com, the place where you can find playlists, articles, and it's just the hub for everything Soul Sugar Joint. Thank you so much again for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Peace.